Welcome back to the channel from Nepal and its fabled capital, Kathmandu. I arrived here a couple of days ago, and as with many first-time visitors, it requires a bit of adjustment. Kathmandu is both a booming tourist gateway to the Himalayas and one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities on Earth, going back to the 2nd century. For trekkers and outdoor enthusiasts, it's a jumping-off point for adventure. For others, the draw is the exotic cultural landscape, with the city's age-old temples and palaces giving Kathmandu an air of mystery. Kathmandu still has a big town vibe, despite being a city of more than 1 million people and with a metro area of 4 million spread out over the northwest part of the sprawling Kathmandu Valley. The valley, at just under 5,000 feet elevation, was historically known as the Nepal Mandala, a geographic subdivision that for centuries has been home to the Newar people. The Newars are of Chinese Tibetan origin, and they still constitute an important part of the increasingly multi-ethnic makeup of this place. Regardless of ethnicity, Nepal and Kathmandu is overwhelmingly Hindu, with a sizable number of Buddhists. And as you might expect of a country that's the birthplace of Siddhartha Gautama, aka the Buddha, the two religions' similarities are emphasized here more than perhaps any other place in the world. Nepal was a Hindu kingdom for more than 200 years until just a couple of decades ago, when it became a secular state and self-declared federal republic. That followed years of civil war in the 1990s and early 2000s that brought down the kingdom and led to a peaceful democratic revolution in 2006. Something else that's different about Nepal's history: it was never a colony. Through much of the colonial era in this part of the world, it was and remains a buffer state between China and India. Like me, most visitors who come to Kathmandu end up in the Thamel District. Thamel is its own thing, with bustling streets and alleys that have served as a magnet for visitors since at least the 1970s. That's when artists and hippies began to descend upon this place. Thamel is where you'll find nightclubs, bars, along with a bulk of hotels and restaurants catering to foreigners, but it isn't really representative of Kathmandu as a whole. One of the good things about the Thamel District is that where many of the smaller hotels are located, it's fairly quiet. I'm walking along the street where my hotel is located. You can barely hear a pin drop after 10 o'clock at night. I'm sitting in the little restaurant inside the Grand Yak Boutique Hotel where I'm staying. I didn't realize until the second day I was here that although there's a very nice restaurant here, there's apparently no kitchen. I was ordering breakfast and it's about to come. I've just ordered it again this morning, and it's a delightful breakfast, but it's brought in from a restaurant around the corner. Well, my breakfast has come, delivered, completely wrapped. I've unwrapped it and it looks delicious. Walk a couple of blocks past the hotel to where the main streets begin, and it's a whole other world. Walk out of the district and you're almost instantly submerged in a Kathmandu that is more raw, more real, more colorful, throbbing with a cadence more like Old Delhi in India. Sidewalks are a rarity in Kathmandu. You just don't find many of them. You see some steps sort of falling out of businesses along the street, and that's about all you get, and usually not even that. So when you're walking in this city, you're literally sharing the road, mostly with motorcycles, some cars. You learn very quickly to watch your back and not avert your eyes for very long. Hello. No, I'm just walking. I don't need a ride. No, I just walking. But you have a nice bike. Good. Always someone seeking to offer you a ride for a small amount of money, but it's hard to make people understand sometimes, especially people who are hustling on one of these rickshaw type tuk-tuks, bicycle powered, that you want to walk. I think many of the transportation providers here just assume that when they see a foreigner, the foreigner wants to ride, but that's not the case. Well, many old cities like this have, of course, ancient alleyways, intricate street designs. That's true of this town as well, except that it's distinctive in a certain kind of way. There's no real grid here for the most part, and you can be walking along and suddenly you're at a little plaza, for lack of a better word. It's really just a wide intersection where several of these narrow streets come together, and because the population is so dense here, many of these streets, the ones more enjoyable to be on, are primarily pedestrian streets, but of course not entirely, because as you soon learn, anywhere a person can walk here, a motorcycle will be right behind. It's just a phenomenal reuse of an obviously very old building. It looks like it was perhaps once a temple or a shrine, but nothing goes unused here. You see these props up against buildings. Of course, that's a consequence of the April 2015 earthquake. Did a lot of damage. I've arrived at the Swayambhu temple complex. As is so often the case, you aren't just driven to a temple, open a door and walk in. I've come far up a hill by cab, and you're left to walk the rest of the way. It's a great cardio workout to start your morning. The air is sweet with the smell of incense around the perimeter of the stupa. People coming and going, and the devotees spinning the prayer wheels. This is one of the oldest religious shrines in Nepal, going back to the 5th century CE. And there was an earlier temple here, long since destroyed, dating to at least 200 years before Christ. Swayambhu is considered to be a Buddhist temple, but as with plenty of other shrines in Nepal, it's also revered by Hindus. Down through the centuries, many of Nepal's royal rulers have paid homage at this temple, setting it apart among the country's numerous shrines regarded as sacred. The stupa consists of a dome at the base with a gilded cube structure on top. You can see the painted eyes of Buddha looking in all 4 directions. And encircling the dome at the bottom, there are 5 shrines, each with statues of the Buddha inside. During the 15th centuries, this temple has stood here. It's been renovated, but not seriously altered, roughly every 100 years. The most recent facelift occurred a few years ago, financed, by the way, by a Tibetan society from California. One of the distinctions of this temple is that it is a pure product of so-called Newar Buddhism, distinctive to Tibet and Nepal, not only for its iconography, but for its practice, with its own caste system and absent the monastic structure of other forms of Buddhism. The Newars today are a distinct minority in Nepal, but for lack of a better term, they're considered the original Nepalis with an advanced civilization that predates all others in the Kathmandu Valley. And their influence, social, economic, and religious, is paramount here. The ongoing tradition of the living goddess chosen from the highest Newar caste is one example. The ultimate prominence of this temple is another.
I will take now. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
As you walk around this temple, you realize pretty soon that you have a perspective problem. That is, you're, again, so close to it, it's hard to get a perspective of the entire stupa. You need a drone or a slightly more distant hill for that. But nonetheless, it's quite an impressive sight up close. Rather more intimate than one would maybe suspect. As with religious shrines in most places, a community has grown up directly around this one, including a substantial souvenir market that's filled with all sorts of venerable objects, mostly metals, copper, but also more ordinary souvenir trinkets and some works of art, besides its obvious interest as an antiquity site. This hilltop is a favorite place for people to come to get a sweeping panorama of Kathmandu and the Kathmandu Valley. Today is a lovely sunny day, almost cloudless, and so you can imagine how disappointing it is, although somewhat expected, that there is no such great view available. If this were a clear day, and it does happen, a pollution-free day, usually directly after a rain, you can see all the way to Mount Everest from here. But today, I'm sorry to say, like most days, it is a sorry sight to behold the condition of the sky. There are relatively few places of solitude within Kathmandu, and I'm in one of them, a neoclassical formal garden of the British style, known as the Garden of Dreams. It was once the private estate of Nepali aristocrat Shamsher Rana, descended from a line of Rana aristocrats and prime ministers during the country's long period as a monarchy. Besides living a life of privilege, one of his loves was horticulture, and this garden was his personal oasis. Upon his death in 1964, it was turned over to the government of Nepal, which, no other way to say it, let it fall into ruin for decades. With help from the Austrian government, the garden was restored in the early 2000s. Even so, what you see here is only half of what once existed. It's a great place to take refuge from the chaotic streets of the city. Perhaps unintentionally, it's also a window into the legacy of the few who've lived lavishly. As for Shamsher Rana, he was formerly known as Field Marshal Sir Kaiser Shamsher Jang Bahadur Rana. He was the third son of a Maharaja who gifted him this property. He was married twice. His first wife, it was an arranged marriage, was in line to become Nepal's first female monarch until a little brother was born to usurp her. If you'd been present at the court of St. James for the inauguration of Queen Elizabeth in 1937, you could have found him there as Nepal's foreign minister. In death, his cherished garden lives on, resurrected from decades of ruin. It costs about 400 rupees to enter this place, which is only $3 US. But if you're an expat here, you can buy a monthly pass and save even on that. This is a great place for people to come, which they do on a regular basis, just to get away from it all, eat a lunch at a cafe on the grounds, or just sit around and sip coffee and read. Not too many places like that in busy Kathmandu. The living goddess has just made an appearance to the balcony window directly behind me.